I think I put more pressure on myself than Mustaine did. He was well accommodating to me, and we did reference the original bass track if we needed to. And Mustaine wanted me to, listen to it and absorb it and see what I would do as a musician. But, I'm not so naive that I think I'm going to come in and reinvent Megadeth bass playing.
The David Ellefson Show. Featuring Grammy Award winner David Ellefson and respected metal journalist Joshua Toomey. Presented by EllefsonEmporium.com. Here's David and Joshua.
All right, well, hey, we're all here. Welcome to the David Ellefson Show. Today, 4 bass players. Myself, my co-host, Joshua Toomey, bass player, Jeroen, I think I'm saying it right, up in Amsterdam. Something
yes,
like that.
Jeroen. Yes.
Okay, Jeroen. And, of course, Steve Di Giorgio, other known as SDG, and he is here with us today. So thanks for joining us. How you guys doing?
Good. Awesome, man. Good to see you again, Dave. How are you?
I am well. I am doing very well.
Cool.
So you guys, this Quadvium thing is really, it got my attention. Part of our David Ellefson Bass Coalition, which now just by being here, you're automatically a member of it. And
oh, cool.
I don't know what it gets you, some loyalty points or I don't know, discounts somewhere. I don't know what it gets you yet. But so anyway, thanks for
We'll work for a lot less. Work for a lot less, brother. So that means a lot. Thanks.
Exactly. But I thought this was so cool. Anytime I see bass players being creative, doing stuff like this, and you two guys coming together, 2 different continents, both playing fretless, and you guys are the centerpiece of it, and the guitars and drums and everything else are kind of the landscape around it. So I just tell a little bit about how it started, how you guys got to know each other. Let's give a little backstory here.
Yeah, well, actually, that goes quite a while back in time. Like Steve and I think we met like 18 years ago. Often when we were traveling, Steve was traveling Europe or I was touring the US, so we met. But one day we came with the idea like, yeah, it would be so nice to do something with 2 basses, but how? And we didn't really had a clear idea about it, but we were like playing around with the idea for many, many years, right, Steve?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we knew for sure we weren't going to do this kind of big mess of trading off solos and just creating this hot lick album. We wanted to integrate the bass line and share in this kind of call and response type of responsibility for bass. But all these ideas that we would have of, what we wanted the band to be were discussed over the years, like Jeroen said. But man, knowing how to do it took a long time because we knew it was a very, very special and unique thing. And I remember a couple of years ago when I first met you in Hanover, I was picking your brain about what you and Frankie do. And
Right.
this was kind of back when we had some song ideas put in some folders tucked away and stuff like this. And it was an idea for a long time, but it didn't really come to something that you could really listen to until we found some musicians to come along and help us. And they reined in our ideas and made them cohesive and helped us through the process and compose these songs. And so we consider, the focus and then the big highlight is 2 bass players coming together. And not only that, but we both play fretless. So now we're both, on the verge of this kind of microtonal storm and all this kind of stuff. But even so, the news is about 2 bass players coming together making this. We always consider it a full quartet. The band would be absolutely not possible without the effort of the other 2 members as well. So we try to show that in the music, but yeah, I mean, it's also obvious that, you know, we're jumping in and trying something a little different with the bass players kind of commanding the sonic landscape.
Sure. You know, probably the first time I saw something like this, 1990, 91. So I became friends with Steve Bailey. He was an instructor at Musicians Institute, and my bass tech sober companion, in other words, keep David off drugs guy, hired by the manager back in 1989 when we were trying to get Megadeth sobered up and get our shit together and kind of get things moving in the right direction, which, you know, and then into the 90s, you know, happened for us. But so Randy Kurtz is his name. And so he was working for me, and he said, hey, I know Steve Bailey. And so I was starting to, you know, mess around a little bit with some 5-string stuff and just kind of, you know, exploring what's the next chapter, as we do. Right. So, you know, then I got turned on to Steve, and then he and Victor Wooten did their stuff, their Bass Extreme. So I think that's probably the first time I saw something like this. Two very different players, Steve, the 6-string fretless, and Victor 4-string, a slap monster, you know, so these guys. And, you know, did you get any kind of inspiration from something like that at all? Like guys out of the rock field, if you will?
Well, I remember that Steve and I, we shared many ideas, like in a very broad spectrum of styles. Like we both love ethnic influences, like Arabic, you know, especially fretless is very, it can be very attractive to have those influences in there. But I think we exchanged for at least 5-6 years, like rough ideas, sending each other music, just sharing pieces like, wow, what do you think about this? This would be so nice. But we couldn't get really a grip on it. We looked in so many directions. But I think where we really got more clear to the point, like what do we want style-wise? Because we had our wish list. Like we both love fusion music, jazz, but basically, we are known for metal. So I think it was a process where we really had to go through and making up our minds. And basically, once we found our 4th member, Eve, she could take those rough ideas together and compose like a full song around it. You know, like we don't consider ourselves as main composers. We can fill in a piece, we can make bass arrangements in a certain way, but we don't see ourselves as guys that compose a piece from A to Z. So we needed this person.
That's cool. So, you know, it's funny because like when me and Frank Bello started, so when we did the Big Four back in 2010, me and Mark Mengi, who's my partner in Metal Allegiance, you know, he worked for Harkey at the time, Samson and Harkey. So our mission was, let's get Frank Bello over to Harkey, which we did. And then that led to Mengi setting up some clinics for us that we would do. And, you know, Frank had come out, jammed to some Anthrax tunes. I'd come out, play some Megadeth songs, talk a little bit as we do in clinics, right? And I said to him, I said, you know, dude, we should probably write some songs. We should at least have some backing tracks, you know, maybe because nothing's lamer than playing to a laptop. I just hate it, you know? So then we played, we did a thing at Bass Player Live. It was at SIR in Hollywood. And
I was there, yeah.
Were you there? Yeah. And
yeah,
so
I watched it.
And we actually, okay. So prior to that, we had played Bass Player Magazine had an event at the Key Club where they kind of do a lifetime achievement thing, you know, blah, blah, blah. And Frank, he said, he goes, I know the guy to help us pull it together. Cause like you said, you need kind of this headquarters, right? You need this person who's got the Pro Tools. They're a studio whiz. You know, you need that guy. And I'm not that guy. You know, I'm like the idea guy, the call everybody up, put things together guy. And so he introduced us to Jay Rustin, who is producer, Anthrax, Amon Amarth, all this stuff. And he said, here's the guy. And so Jay is also a bass player. So then we got together at his studio in Sherman Oaks, and he called in Jeff Riedel on drums. And that, you know, Jay became the hub, and that's what kind of made it happen. So with you guys, I mean, you know, I was listening, you know, Eve is great. And she not only plays guitar, but does she also do the piano and all this other kind of, you call it soundscapes, right? Stuff around it, right? Super freaking cool, man. Yeah.
We were blown away. We would get together on Zoom sessions since we all live in different places. And exactly like you just said, me and Jeroen had tons of ideas and we had tons of ambition, but we were not the studio guys at all. We were the least qualified to be that hub, and we needed that as well. And the first person we found was Jeroen's old friend Yuma, our drummer, and yeah, another super savvy studio person that helped pull some of our crazy ideas together. And being a drummer also kind of made things cohesive. But we realized even just the three of us together, we're still all support players. And so when Eve came into the picture as this main composer and a way beyond, competent studio wizard, it was cool because she would do the composition in a new demo phase, and we would link up on Zoom, and they were able to put our Zoom call into a Pro Tools session. So we could look at the screen, we see each other and we could hear each other, but we could also watch all the WAV files go by. We could say, oh, okay, here, stop, bar 47 through bar 60. Now this is a really, really good part. It goes by too fast. We want this to repeat. Or play it later in the song, and okay, cool. And so we would do notes in real time and build like this. And then the follow-up meeting was listening to the song and how the changes affected it and stuff. And we would go like in this kind of pattern with the writing session. So yeah, me and Jeroen were just ready to throw bass all over everything, but we couldn't until we had that headquarters. And that's when those group Zoom meetings that were integrated into a Pro Tools session. Until that started happening, we had real no songs to go by. But rewinding way back to when you first brought this up, I mean, we listened to Bailey and Wooten, and I saw the thing that you and Frankie did. And anytime, and there's a young band in Australia called Omnific. It's a couple bass players with a drummer. They do most of their stuff as just a trio, just the two bassists with a drummer. And anything like that, anything where bass players are coming together, doing stuff outside of the norm and not just being this sit in the shadows, kind of support playing role. Of course, we take notice of all of that stuff. And, it was all good information, but the thing about what me and Jeroen wanted to do didn't really match any of those templates. We had this really abstract idea to play in a much more conversational way as bassists and almost make the dual bass just kind of culminate as one bass line. And when you're building stuff like this in a Pro Tools session, you can hear that, and you can go like that. But when we actually got down to recording our own parts physically and realizing that the pieces of basses coming together, even though you hear it as a whole, you have to separate it, and he plays his parts and I play mine, and it becomes really disjointed because we're trying to do this call and response thing. And if you just listen to one bass, it's incomplete intentionally, but it makes it really hard to play. So we knew that we were attempting something, that we hadn't heard before, and it was a difficult road to get there. It was hard to do that, but when it finally came together, also, like we've been saying, Yuma helped put some super glue on these bass tracks of sticking them together, and then we sent it all over to Eve, who did the big mix down and kept the tones alive. I sound like me, Jeroen sounds like him. We didn't have to compromise a lot of tone. We didn't have to sacrifice too much of either of us, because for some cool accidental coincidental reason, the tones just shelved to themselves. And the production came out with this big heavy sound, but not too heavy, not too saturated and overbearing. And it was fun to watch these unexpected things just kind of fall into place along the way. And we're psyched to have this whole group doing it, and I'm glad you gave the album a listen.
All right, guys, let's announce the winner for the Louder Than Life 6-pack of tickets to Louder Than Life 2025. David, I think we got to go with Adam Brazee 3858. So again, Adam Brazee, hopefully we're saying that right. hit me up. You can reach me, talktoomeytalk@gmail.com, or just hit me up on Facebook, and we will get you those tickets. So congratulations to Adam.
Awesome. Yeah, congratulations. Cool thing to be a part of, for sure. So we're very thankful that they extended that out to us. And yeah, thanks to all the viewers and listeners for tuning in. We got a bunch of good podcasts in the can. Good stuff coming out here over the next few weeks. So
Yeah, and thank you to everybody that participated in the contest too, because we got a ton of entrants in there. So yeah, so Adam, hit me up on Facebook or email me, and we will work those tickets out. So again,
Cool.
thank you.
Yep. So hey everybody, David and Josh here, and just want to let you know about Rockabilia, our new partners here on the show, and you can visit them and enter David10 for 10% off on any of your purchases. So some cool stuff they have there, Josh.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome company. I mean, if you're of my generation of the, we go to the magazine aisle, and, when it was a print magazine, and, Rockabilia was in every Metal Edge and Metal Maniacs and whatever else, and you would circle every Megadeth t-shirt you wanted, or Metallica or Slayer or whatnot. So super pumped to have Rockabilia on with the David Ellefson Show. And, just a few things. They've got over 500,000 items over at rockabilia.com, including staples like the Master of Puppets shirts, Rest in Peace shirts. They do limited edition exclusive drops each month. And the one thing that they wanted to stress was everything is 100% authentic. No bootlegs over there at rockabilia.com. So that's obviously a plus there too.
Cool. So the money goes where it's supposed to go. So, all right. Excellent. All right. So check it out. Rockabilia, David 10 for 10% off. Check it out. Rockabilia.com.
One of my favorite parts of the whole record is what you're talking about, where you can tell the two basses apart. When you're doing, when Steve's doing something, when Jeroen's doing something, you can tell like when who's doing what, but it's not a call and response. Like I'm going to do a solo, you do a solo. You guys are like doing music together, and it's as a bass player, it's kind of nice to kind of hear something like that. That's not, you're not just playing a rhythm track with him soloing and vice versa and things like that. It's great musical composition.
Thanks. That's a huge compliment, because that's what we set out to do, but kind of at first not really being able to vocalize that until we planned out. And I'll let Jeroen fill in everything, but he was, out of the two of us, he was more of the mastermind on how to choreograph this stuff. He demoed the bass 1 and bass 2 a lot before I got to Amsterdam to record. And yeah, he did a good job on keeping things pretty balanced. If one of us were to take a high melody in the beginning of a song and highlight that player's tone and play this melodious thing while the other bass hung in with the guitar player and created this kind of syncopated thing, he did a good job on later on in the song when that reappears that we switch roles, and then the other player is playing the high melody, and it was divided up pretty equal if it needed to be. I mean, there was in the whole picture, it's pretty equal. We share a lot, but his tone suits a certain area better, and then I got this giant piece of farm equipment that suits the song in a different area, and yeah, so as I said, I wanted to let him kind of tell you guys how he found the place to put these two basses. So
yeah, well, I think I remember that it was in a very early process where we tried to visualize, like, okay, how are we going to have these basses having a conversation, like not necessarily with soloing. We were both not really solo players, like it. I think it grows way more. Also, the fact that we played a lot of death metal, so with monotone vocals and not necessarily like melodic vocals. There's so much space also for bass guitar, like melodic wise, or and I think in this case it was just a matter of balancing out both basses. They didn't clash tone wise, as Steve said, which is very valuable, like if you would record this with two of the same basses, two whatever Sans amp drivers, you would easily clash and get lost because you're operating in the same frequency, like range. But it was still a matter of also seeing our background, where we come from. In our previous bands, I think we worked a lot with counterpoint already. With counterpoint, you always have the option, to let one bass just go accompanying and have the other one like more like doing a sort of a lead, but it's always in the piece itself. It's integrated, so it's not that rhythm and lead idea at all. It actually fell together very naturally.
Did you guys record? So, Steve, you said you went to Amsterdam. Did you record as a group? Did you already have some tracks down? You two sat together in a room and sort of riffed back and forth. Like, how was because you talk about having a conversation. It's hard to have a conversation. I did a podcast with Max Norman about this, that playing in a room. Producers love when bands play together because the conversation happens organically in the room. When everybody's, coming in individually, it's like voice texting. It's like we're sending each other a message and we respond to it, but it's not a conversation like being on the phone or like we're doing right here,
No, I think that's, you're right. You're totally right. I think that's kind of the old school that was ingrained in me. And Jeroen being close in age was in full agreement. It would have been a lot economically easier to just everyone do their tracks at home and file share and put it together. And because of the four of us being so far away, the drums were done in a drum studio on their own. And since the guitarist was our main composer, the guitar was recorded more methodically as pieces were coming together. But I made sure that we cleared our calendars, and I talked to you in months and months in advance. And I said, I'm going to sit right next to you, and we're going to go over this stuff and record it. And so not only are the basses going to interact, side by side, but physically, like you said, we are going to be there with each other. And so I wanted the interplay of these two instruments to be as organic as possible, and that meant being in the same place at the same time. And I went to, he has a nice little setup, and we sat there literally like totally side by side, and we worked a lot of this stuff out. Like I said, he done a lot of the pre-arrangements. When I got there was some cool guide tracks, like here's me, here's you and stuff, but he left some holes here and there for me to contribute. And the poor guy worked so hard on such a masterpiece, just ran out of gas himself. So that gave me my chance to come in and put a little bit, but for sure Jeroen did the bulk of the work of these two basses. But the cool thing was we were there to hear it in real time and adjust things and add things and do what we needed to do. And we would go out to eat together, and if the sun was just right, we'd go downstairs. He lives in a really beautiful spot in Amsterdam, and we would go down and take photos together. And we wanted this sense that we had been friends for years. And so it's like we wanted the chemistry of our proximity to shine through in the music as well. We wanted it real, and we wanted to be able to, point to each other's finger on the neck and say, no, pull this up. It needs to be sharper, or, why don't you try it down in this? And we were, it was really a duet, a complete duet. We worked long hours, and it was important for, at least in this quartet version, it wasn't financially feasible to do all four of us together, but I made sure no matter what that we could put these basses together, because it needed to have that real-time physical cohesiveness to sound real, to sound genuine. And in the mix, they did a nice, Eve put us, in a stereo field, but one guy favors one side and the other guy favors the other. And that's the way we sat at the desk. And that's the way it sounded, and
like four people in a room. Hey, so speaking of that, are you guys planning to do any shows Should we go do some shows together? Should I call Frankie? Should we set something up here? What should we do? Should we bass coalition
All
this
bass
shit?
players.
What should we do? Josh, bring your bass. Let's go.
Yeah.
I mean, are you going to do some gigs? Are shows, even if it's something in Amsterdam or?
Well,
what's
like there's places already like post some like performance. The thing is that at the moment we prefer to continue writing and record more, so we have more material, and because I think honestly some songs are definitely playable on the album, some songs are really demanding, and I'm also talking about the time signatures. The changes there are really demanding, also for a drummer who needs to perform this live. This is it's very demanding stuff, so maybe the new material may go a little bit less in that direction, that we will definitely keep the same atmosphere.
Yeah.
But 3-minute pop songs.
Yeah, babe.
Well,
Big
good.
drastic
Hurry up,
change.
write another record so we can go do something. Let's get this going. Let's get this party going, man.
Yeah, totally.
That's
We
awesome.
we definitely, the whole album really clocks in barely past a half hour anyway. So if we were to throw a show together, I mean, we'd exhaust everything that we worked on. So number one, yeah, we need to build up, set time worthy amount of material. But as Jeroen was saying, we also need to, now that we've jumped in and created this thing out of nothing, and now we have step one in place, and we know we're focusing where to evolve it to, and we're tending towards, let's make it a little more playable. Let's make it, to where it works physically and on the mind and stuff. I mean, because Studio Magic helps you get through a lot of stuff, but that was necessary in the creation process. So we're proud of the first album, but we want the next one to have some longer groove sections, and we can still do all this technical magic and all the craziness that set us up to give us our sound, but we want to focus on the performance part of it. So I think it's a double-handed thing. We want to build the material, but we want to build listenable material, and then combine it with the first. Then we'll have a good mixture and a good variety of what became us. But
well, it's like a lot of our records, right? Even in death and thrash metal, right? We want to just fucking go off and just kind of show off and go as deep as we can, and then we go out and play. I mean, I remember our first tours, Killing Is My Business, clocked into like 28 minutes. So it's like, if you're gonna play, we couldn't headline. We didn't have enough songs, so you can only be, and so hey, welcome to starting a new band, right? And then then you play some covers or whatever, which I think for you is probably a little bit harder, because what are you going to do for cover songs? And unless you're going to maybe play some Beatles covers or something, you could do it, you could play Enter Sandman or I don't know, something to fill some time, but you're right. The second album kind of becomes that one where, we always musically mature a bit on a second album, right? Because we've done the first rodeo together. Now we know, they're just, we like you said, you guys are musical friends. You're musical friends in the studio, and now that friendship is a 4-piece, not just the two of you guys, right? So
right, totally.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back, Josh. Thanks.
Okay, good.
Last night it was me. I was in and out.
No.
And all of a sudden it's Josh. He's over at Hangar 18 in an undisclosed location. So
I wanted to throw in something here for both the guys, but I remember being a kid, the guy, over here, gets me into playing bass when I'm like, 12, 13, and then 14, 15 hits, and I see the Philosopher video on Headbangers Ball, and I immediately run to the music store, grab a fretless bass, and like doing the stuff, man. So what got both of you guys into the fretless and kind of wanting to bring those into heavier stuff?
Wow, I think that's for both of us goes the classical background. I mean, I started playing violin around the age of 7. Classical background, a lot of practicing. It was really like a task, a weekly task, to go back to the music school and get your homework done. So I was, yeah, I grew up with that in a pretty, fanatic way. At the time that I joined high school, I just left violin playing. I switched to bass guitar, and I was so happy with it. But later on, I think it was the flamenco ensembles where I used to play with, where bass gets really melodic. And Carlos Benavent, the bass player of Paco de Lucia, who brought actually jazz into flamenco. That was for me the eye opener. And that's where I said, you know what? I can go 100% fretless from now on. And that's how it actually grew.
Europeans, you guys have a very different upbringing. I played tenor sax in orchestra band, but it was Americans understand classical music very different. Don't you guys think? I mean, you guys, play it because it's here, it's right here in your backyard. Right. And I'm in Germany right now, as I say that, right. So it's here, it's right. But for us Americans, it's sort of, by the time, me and Steve and Josh, were born, we had Elvis on TV and Ed Sullivan Show and the Beatles and, and right. We Americans, we like fireworks. We like flashy, fun stuff, and it's just kind of how we are. Right. And so to go back to the disciplines, and like you say, with practicing, I have a friend of mine, he's Chinese, piano player, and the disciplines that he does, and he sits and he plays, and it's a different discipline than what a lot of us, did in America, I think. I mean, we had our Eddie Van Halens, our Jocos, but again, it's a lot of fireworks, right? Versus just these mundane, the uncool disciplines of just practicing and going through all these rudimentary things that maybe gave you a completely different angle and a different view of this over here in Europe.
Yeah,
I was a lot more closer in my upbringing, like you were saying, Dave. I went through band class and I was playing bass trombone and tuba, and it wasn't until there was a spot open in the orchestra period class to where there was an upright bass available for me to learn back then in school. And yeah, the sheet music that's handed out to play in these classes, it involves classical pieces to play, but there's not a focus on it. You said, it's this big mix of culture of our country kind of creates in a way kind of like a non-culture. And so the demand, and just the pride of having that stuff, yeah, it's lacking. And once I learned to play the upright and discovered electric, we would go to the friend's house after school, and that's when we started making our own bands and playing really heavy stuff. We wanted to be more like, everybody wanted to be Kiss or Judas Priest, and there was no slap on the wrist, like, no, get back to work. We just smoked a joint and played like Steve Harris and Geezer Butler as much as we could, so I know what you mean. And that's kind of where I came from. So a lot of this discovery of bringing fretless into heavy music came from very, very peripheral sources. I wasn't a huge Jocko guy. Of course, everyone knew who he was, but I only owned one Weather Report album, and I was familiar with that one album, but I didn't have his whole body of work. So my stuff came from a lot of different places. One of the earlier, like, obviously fretless bass as opposed to subtle there was a Jethro Tull record that it came out in 1980 when the band was going through massive lineup changes and identity changes. They were straying away from that kind of folk music thing that got them when they were trying to embrace, the new 80s decade coming in and bringing in a lot of synth players. And they had an electric violinist, Eddie Jobson was in the lineup, and Mark Cranny on drums. Well, there was a bass player that played on this album named Dave Pegg, and he stayed with Jethro Tull for many years, but that was the only album that he played fretless on. And it's, to a lot of Jethro Tull fans, that's in the bottom of the pile because it's a big departure from what gave them their sound. But as a bass player, if you tune into that, especially side 2, wow, some amazing sounds were coming out. And, being a new to the bass instrument in high school, hearing that stuff, that's what I wanted to do. And slowly hearing these obscure players like Mick Karn, who played, I think the band was called Japan or UK. I know I mixed those up because there was Mick, the bass player, and the singer from each one of those bands got together and made a project called Dolly's Car. And if you want to hear some really out there fretless bass, go find the Dolly's Car album. And this is what I'm going to my after school band practice with in my head, doing this kind of stuff. And I guess, you know, even my guitar players are looking at me and like, what the hell is this? A rubber band? I mean, what the and so that's where stuff like what you hear on Philosopher and these type of little trademark over glissandos and stuff like that, this is where I was hearing it. And then when you know, being out here in California, we had Shrapnel Records right here in the Bay Area, and there was a band called Blue Murder, and that was my discovery of Tony Franklin. And when I heard that fretless sound in a little bit more heavy, a little more shreddy context, I said, all right, this is home, and I'm going to do my part to, you know, make my identity and try to create something different. And that was, you know, luckily I got picked up in the Death lineup because that's where it kind of put me on the map,
Right.
to continue with that. But yeah, so we come from, me and Jeroen share this slightly, you know, music nerdy background. He was a violinist, and I learned to play upright at a young age. So we learned the old-fashioned fretless. You know, you learn where the notes are positionally. That, you know, you're not relying so much on the lines and dots. But then when you transfer that over to electric bass, it becomes a little easier because of playing the old school instruments. But yeah, so that's where we have this thing where we share so many similar things, and then of course our paths go a different way, and physically we play a different way. So it's this great dichotomy of how scarily similar we are and how many things we like together, but yet we have our own unique sound and smash them together and stuff. So yeah, we were part of the first, you know, the older group of fretless players in metal, but yeah, very distinct. We're both fans of each other's playing. That's how different it is, you know. So getting together and making this album was also pretty fun. Watching, you know, the bass player right next to you pull that stuff off, and you're like, oh, I better get better by tomorrow because I have to do it in front of him, you know.
Yeah, it's not music competition, but it, you know, it's a friendly. Yeah, it just raises the bar. You know, it's funny you mentioned Shrapnel Records because I met Mike Varney at the Steelers show at the Country Club in LA. He had just brought over Ink. And, you know, so talk about, you know, he's probably more like you, Jeroen, the disciplined classical guy. Like, you know, you could tell he really put the time in. He put the hours in. And I didn't know Blue Murder came out. I didn't know that came up through Shrapnel, or that Tony Franklin did, because Tony, you know, I mean, Tony was, although he was British, you know, and through the Firm, I guess, right, is kind of where I first heard him, right, with Jimmy Page. And my gosh, it's like that guy, he not only played great, but he had charisma. He had real, you know, like Percy Jones. Percy Jones had a charisma to his fretless playing that I love to this day. And Tony Franklin has that same thing. You know, he just has a real spark, you know. So, you know, another thing I wanted to ask you about, and then I know Josh has got a couple of things he wants to chat about too, is, you know, so you talk about playing in death metal, right? So, you know, bass in metal is very different because the drums kind of, they lock you into what is, you know, right? There's a groove, right? What you guys are doing here is way more fusion. It's way more free form. So, you know, playing with drummers, I assume same for you. It certainly is an influence on how you're going to play. It's where you're going to set your tone, right? Because of the size of the drums allows how big the bass is going to get. You kind of want to be inside of the drums a little bit. Things are tuned accordingly in a session. Your drums are sort of tuned to the tracks. You know what I mean? So I would think that probably had a big inspiration on the composition as well, right?
Absolutely. I think Yuma is one of the most dynamic playing drummers I know I've ever worked with. which was already clear when I played with him with Pestilence in 2010, I think, quite a while ago.
Right.
But he was really able to visualize this thing. He understood what he had to do with these songs, and he also understood very well the whole concept that these both basses were going to, like being more in front. And I think it helped us big time. Having his tracks, everything changed. First we did a pre-production. We made sketches, and it's like a painting, you go slowly to that last layer, which is really exciting, because that last layer, don't screw it up, because that's where you can go wrong. So it's a very delicate process, right, Steve, where we got by the time to also figure out how to position both basses in the mix. We track them here in Amsterdam, we track them stereo, which means like stereo signal and a mono signal dry DI signal. So that's basically what we track, like it's 3 tracks per bass. And while Steve is positioned on the left side, me on the right side, they still overlap each other. So you have broad sound that you heard a lot with fretless bass in the 80s, Paul Young, Palladino, like this typical sound. I think that added a lot of coloring. And I think for Steve is probably the first time when you were tracking in stereo modus, but it did a lot with your sound as well. Really, like for me, that made a lot of sense to put it in the right context, also with drums.
Very cool.
Yeah, like you were saying, Dave, that in a metal context, the drummer throws down this huge foundation and then takes off. See you later. And then it's up to us to glue everything together to that. In our case, from the starting point, our drummer Yuma understood, as Jeroen just said, that this project is focusing on this bass conversation, this bass kind of spotlight. So he tailored his drums. He understood from the beginning his role was to support this thing going on, but that wasn't all he did. He didn't just put those drums and take off. He would come back later and get out this hyperspeed editing talent that he has, and he's putting our basses in, locking them more in time. It's almost like he had played the music, and so he comes back and he hears our basses, and he can hear just a little bit of blurriness going on, and he would sit there at the desk for even just for an hour, and we would come back and listen, and it just really saved our ass. He was me and Jeroen were working together and tracking each other. No studio engineer, nobody else. But unfortunately, even though we're kind of like the visionary directors of this project, we are also the absolutely least qualified to run this thing. So when Yuma would come back over and sit at Jeroen's desk and start throwing his magic in there, and we would just like, whew, okay, yeah, we'll keep working, but we see that it's going to be even better in the hands of somebody that knows how to do that, and who better than the drummer to fix the timing and the feel of the basses than the one who put down the timing. So he really, really helped us out and get these basses to where. And it wasn't all about locking to the grid all the time. It was also about maybe sliding something a little off to create that natural sound. And we're talking in small increments. So there's just little things like someone like Yuma would know, and he can just see the wave right there on the screen and go right to that spot. And just whatever he did, me and Jeroen would just sit there and go like, wow, it's just getting better and better. So so it was a totally different process. Never seen that before. And yeah, to have the basses be edited after the recording process by the drummer who put the timing down, it was a beautiful thing. It just melted together like butter. It was awesome.
Right.
So
Nice.
Yeah, that was our process.
Well, Steve, man, we gotta address the Ellefson in the room and talk a little bit about the sick, the dying, and the dead.
Yeah.
Obviously you guys are cool. So, I mean, this isn't going to be a got you kind of thing, man. But, did you have any trepidation kind of going into that when David gets the boot from Megadeth, but they've got to record an album? Did you base your idea, base what you were doing off of his tracks that he had already recorded? Was it a clean slate? Talk a little bit about that whole, that time period for you. Cause I mean, it's got to be tough, taking a gig, but also, kind of having to go in and do that,
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I was nervous as hell going into that because that's not something I was used to. I'm playing in Testament all the time, and my band members, Chuck and Alex, do the big side project Metal Allegiance with Dave. And besides them knowing each other personally and being around each other, Megadeth and Testament have a long history of doing stuff together. But in the case of me, I was just never there for those. It's just the way the timing went. I wasn't playing bass in Testament when they were touring with Megadeth, and I'm not participating in the Metal Allegiance and stuff. So yeah, I was quite aware of Dave Ellefson's playing. I remember riding my 10-speed home from high school, listening to the first Megadeth album, and thinking like, hey, I'm a super underground metal fan for sure. I mean, we all listened to Slayer and Anvil and Accept and Merciful Fate and all this stuff, and it was good music. But as a bass player, as a music nerd, I also had to kind of put to the side that, well, there's not a whole lot of interesting bass playing going on. But the first Megadeth album had some fucking killer bass playing on it, and that's when I learned about this guy. And so I was always aware and always had respect for this as a player, because in this new music style that's developing as the underground is coming out of clubs and it's becoming more and more of a thing, the inspiration for great bass lines was pretty slim pickings. And so everyone knew that Megadeth had the riffs and Megadeth had this bass player. And that, we all, Cliff Burton was the best performing bass player we all saw, but you had to go to the show to experience Cliff, because unless you had this advanced stereo system at home, you're not really going to hear him on the album very well. And so that's the young me. And then you come to 2021, and we were all following the news of what was going on in the Megadeth camp. Especially, I was getting personal updates because I've been friends with Dirk, the drummer, for years. We met when we were very young, and we have been doing different projects together. And the conversations would just start like, oh wow, what a major setback. This is, everyone knew what happened when it hit the internet and Ellefson's departure and everything. And so it was just a curiosity happening in a major band. And then of course, like I said, I had an inside connection with Dirk and just simple conversation and just curious what's going to happen. But Dave was out of Megadeth completely when I got the call. So as much pressure as I put on myself to come into that, it wasn't a replacement thing. It wasn't like Scudo or I'm in. They were absent. They were absent a bass player. And talking to Mustaine on the phone, of course he was obviously looking for a replacement, but he just basically told me like, look, we've fallen behind, been working on this record for a long time, as you know, Dave. And he goes, we need to get it done. And he goes, I got really angry at my buddy, and his tracks kind of went away, and we need to get this done. And you have a reputation of flying in and doing this kind of thing. And obviously with Dirk there opening the door to put my name in, obviously helped a lot. And yeah, I think I put more pressure on myself than Mustaine did. He was well accommodating to me and helping me get through the process. And also the recording engineer, what a sweet human being. If I'm talking about Rakestraw.
Yeah, Rakestraw. Right.
Yeah. And we did reference the original bass track if we needed to. And Mustaine wanted me to listen to it and absorb it and see what I would do as a musician. But, I'm not so naive that I think I'm going to come in and reinvent Megadeth bass playing. I knew,
Right.
I knew what it called for, and having massive respect for the player that was there. It was, of course, an obligation for me to make sure that, even being this more of an organic kind of wild weed player, not somebody who sticks to things, that I kind of made sure I reminded myself every morning, okay, I'm in the Megadeth arena now. And yeah, and then when there was some moments, I think Mustaine was living with the songs for a while, and he would just say, hey, I hear possibility, something different here. And I wasn't allowed to hear anything except for just stripped down rhythm tracks. And he would say, let's try this. But for the most part, the bass had already been recorded, and nobody was willing to, get experimental. It was job to get it done. And yeah, I had these kind of rough studio tracks that were, like the guideline, the blueprint, and I could hear Dave's playing in there, and I said, oh, okay, I see what he did here. So I would do, my diligence to keep everybody familiar with what was there in the song. So for the most part, yeah, there was a guide available, but there was a little variety of try this, try that, and that kind of thing. But yeah, it was a huge thing for me coming from my background, playing in the underground and playing, this extreme, behind the times thing, coming up and playing in this big arena. And like I said, I was very, very nervous to do it, and I wanted to make sure that I proved that I was the good choice. That was what was the really cool thing when we were on tour a couple of years ago, when Testament was on tour with Voivod. We had picked up Dave's band for a few shows. I forget which one it was, Dave. It was at the
Diet. Yeah. So just so everybody
Yeah.
knows, me and Steve have already had this conversation. So this isn't like news to me here. We when our record came out 2 years ago, we did a couple shows with Testament, and yeah, you were cool enough. You said, hey Dave, come here, and we sat in the production office and had a chat. We just kind of you in fact, you came forward to me to said, hey, I just want to clear the air and make sure there's no problems between you and me. And look, bass players were pretty chill about this, but I appreciate you doing that. That was very cool of you to sort of get ahead of that and not let there be any sort of, elephant in the room, Ellefson in the room, as Josh calls it. But, yeah, hey, so think about it. One day maybe there's a Megadeth release with both of us on there, so you'll be in
It'd be like a Quadvium thing. You do it like Quadvium, just play them together,
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm sure Mr. Mustaine would be the first one to sign up for that project, wouldn't he?
Oh yeah, he'll be all over that. Well, yeah, so it is what it is. Yeah, so awesome. Look, so it goes, and look, this is a business, it's a profession, personalities are what they are, and life moves on, and so it is. So that was a brutal record. I'm glad to be away from it, to be honest with you. It was a terrible process. It was 5 years in the making. Every song I wrote for it got taken off. Every riff I added, every lyric I added, it was spiteful, it was vengeful, and it was hateful. And it was not my record. I went into it. I said to Dave, why don't we go in here? We're at a phase now. We should go in here like it's P-Cells. We have no money. We have no time. Write a song, record it, move on. Write a song, record it, move on. I said, I feel like fans are tired of these over-digitized, fucking locked to the grid, these perfect heavy metal records, man. Fans want fucking records, I think, that are more organic. It sounds like a band playing in the room together. I mean, then this 40th anniversary Euthanasia came up, and I go back to that. Sean Drover got me into that record again. And I hadn't listened to it in a lot of years, and I listened to it and I go, fuck, we were good, man. That's us playing together in the room, all four of us, laying down tracks together. And I miss that. And, Dieth, we didn't play everything together, but it has that sound to it, When we do Kings of Thrash, we get in the room and we fucking play, and it sounds great. Everybody plays good. Our singer's spot on. And it brings me back to an era of Megadeth when everything wasn't on click tracks. It wasn't so produced, and it was just and those songs from that era are that, you know what I mean? They were meant to be played in smaller venues because that's what the band was at that time. So, you know, things change, but you know, there was clashes all the way down. And, you know, and for me, it started in 2018 when Dave came in to we started a tour in Oslo, and he came in and he said he wanted to re-record the No Life Till Leather demo. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is where we're at after all this time. We're supposed to be writing a new album and new songs, and I was just like, I am not down with that. As fun as it would be to play those songs, because that's one of my favorite Metallica recordings, I was just like, yeah, I ain't down with that, you know. I'm sorry, I couldn't kiss the ring for that one. I was like, I'm out. And so I think our problem started then, you know what I mean? So as we went into the record, he knew I wasn't willing to just fucking say yes, Dave, and go along with shit. So eventually I'm out of the band. You know what I mean? So it goes, right? Bands are what bands are, and you know, so it is what it is, you know. So it's sadly I have not listened to the record. You know, I heard the one video, so it's probably one of your performances I won't be listening to, just because you know the record brings up bad feelings for me. Just and not being thrown out of the band, but just everything about that record.
No, it's very understandable, and
it was sick, dying, and dead. When I was out, I'm like, fucking, it's dead. I'm out. You know what I mean?
It's dead, and I'm gone. No, that's very understandable. That's a very human reaction. You know, I mean, that's you know Mustaine better than anybody. I would say
anybody. Yeah, I've been there longer than probably unless it's his sisters and maybe a couple friends from Huntington Beach or James and Lars. I mean, I literally know that guy longer than pretty much.
Yeah, and I spent a total of 13 days in that country house there off the side of his property, and that was it. That's my entire history with Mustaine. So. Very, very different outlooks on that, but
you were the new guy. The new guy's always the best guy. You know what I mean? So
Steve, what's funny for me is you said that Dave was accommodating to you and like allowing you to write some stuff, and everything that Ellefson's ever said, it's just like, no, it's got to be like this. It's got to be like this. You know, he was being cool with you with the record.
And in all fairness, and not to interrupt you, Steve, in all fairness, when I came back to the band, we did the 13 record, dude, I played all those tracks in 3 days. It was great. I brought Johnny K in because Andy Sneap wasn't available. It was great. You know, the Super Collider record was a fucking nightmare. It was not fun. Then what did we do? Dystopia, you know, I flew in. Dave had written everything and actually had all the tracks down. And me and Dave sat down and I recorded bass to the click track. I had no drums. I had no backing tracks. Dave would show me the parts. I'd make my charts. You know, Dystopia was me and Dave, real brotherhood, super great hang. You know, he really got into producing more just because no one could produce him. He kind of had to learn how to do it because how he wanted to make a record, no one could kind of get their mind around it. So he stepped up. So Dystopia was a super great experience together with Dave. You know what I mean? So it just look, you know,
comes and goes. Yeah,
throw a dart. You know what I mean? And that was one where it was like, not so much on the last one. So you know, that's
but you know. It wasn't so much to address your question. It wasn't so much allowing me to write things. There was we're way beyond pre-production phase, as you know, Dave remembers. They were, you know, Kiko's solos were all over the place. Dave was finishing up tiny little vocal things. It was way, way, way late in the game. So no, it wasn't like I was writing new stuff, but there was areas of just possibilities for personal interpretation, little flexibility, I would say. But Megadeth is Megadeth, and the bass is, you follow Mustaine and you lock in with that kick and snare, and it's a metal to the metal record. And that's what I said. I didn't go in there with any preconceived notions that I was gonna, you know, reinvent anything. I knew I was going into a Megadeth place, and I had to, you know, follow the rules. But like I said, I knew that there wasn't any overlap or any contact or any kind of weird thing between me and Ellefson, because there was a time period from when he left till they gave me the call to come and do it. So, you know, I didn't feel that there should be anything personal, but I knew, being in a band, being in Testament, and having my band members, you know, friends with this guy, that I needed to make that connection, and I grabbed him. Everybody had stopped sound checking for the day and went to lunch, and I said, "Hey, sit down. You know, let's give me your thoughts. Here's the guy right here. I came in and I pooped in your toilet, so let's let's talk about it." And that part of our conversation went very quickly by, and that was special to me that day to talk to Ellefson, because I saw what an incredibly positive person, and just like you said, like the bass player community, I mean, we're more of a support group for each other for what we go through in our band. And that was super evident that day. And the conversation about that album, like I said, it was addressed, and it was absolutely the non-issue. And we started talking about a lot of other things, and I got out of it that, that you're a very humble and super positive, move forward kind of guy. And that was inspiring, because I went in there as the guy who replaced your bass on a Megadeth record, but I came out of there remembering that I'm that kid riding that 10-speed Hope, listening to this, one of the cooler bass players of the early underground time, thinking like, wow, this is cool. So, that I felt the big brother, little brother syndrome in that case. And it was awesome. And yeah, it was cool.
It's really cool. I just sent Bob Daisley an email today, because I became friends with him, and I just got off the Black Sabbath thing. Same thing. I said, I don't think I played any of your songs at the gig, but just so you know, me and Frank Bello and all of us of our age group, we fucking missed you. You know what I mean? Because you were the guy, right? You were the guy. And a lot of those people, hired, fired, in and out. And Bob probably being one of the more famous, legends of that camp for that kind of stuff. And I'm glad to have gotten friends with him, just like how Steve, you and I become friends, and look, it's the way it goes, right? It's what it is. And, so there you go, Josh. You got to ask your question.
Friends. It's
now
not
Josh knows. It's not show friends, it's show business, So.
That's right, Josh. It's a little more incestuous than you think. Band business is band business, and we don't want to touch that. We're bass players. We got our own community, and we don't let the stress interfere with friendship.
That's one thing, being a fan of Megadeth and being a fan of David, but also being a fan of you, Steve. It's like when he got kicked out, I was somewhat on the inside, on a different side of it, kind of hoping that he didn't get let go. Then when I hear Steve Di Giorgio doing the record, I'm like, wonder what that's going to sound like. It was intriguing to see what you were going to do with the record. So kind of it was cool for, I guess, on the fan side to just kind of check out what you would do on a Megadeth record. How about that?
Yeah, it was Steve being Ellefson for a couple of weeks.
Nice.
Like I said, I'm not going to go in there and I'm not going to put philosopher licks in, on top of Dirk's playing. I mean, Mr. Mustaine, he was. I snuck a little bit of fretless on there.
Nice.
There's some kind of instrumental interludes, some stuff where we gave it a shot. We plugged it in and tried it, and you see his brow furrow and his lips purse, that famous Mustaine look, like, yeah, I like it. So, Rickshaw would give me the thumbs up, like, cool, man, cool. So it's those type of things that were the flexible things. But no, I definitely didn't go in there and recreate anything or do anything special. I just got done, I was playing a cover album, and Ellefson had laid the groundwork. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeroen, there's still room for you to play in a Megadeth album now. So there you go.
Oh, wow.
We're all playing on Megadeth. Yeah.
You can stereo fretless, though.
You're next, Jeroen. You're next. Let's go. Get ready.
And then Josh after that. Well, brothers,
all go on tour as a mega bass,
Exactly. Guys, thanks so much for joining us here.
Yeah,
this is really great. And I love Quadvium. I think it's so cool. And
me too.
I've got my eye on us doing something together, a show. Maybe we all go to Amsterdam and we play gig somewhere. Our friend Paulo from Sepultura owns the BRO bar. So, I think, I'm talking about another Bass Warrior tour next year in March, so I'm thinking about who can we I want to do different things. I want to add people and do events. And, I like this thing where, brothers play together, So anyway, there's all in my mind. I'm already a year down the road thinking, all right, we got some shit we can put together here. So maybe that's something
so much. Thank
Yeah.
you, so
Thank you.
Dave.
You're welcome.
We
Yeah,
really
my
appreciate-
door's open, and let's make it happen, man. I think it'd be great. So, all right. Well,
Yeah.
listen, best of luck with
Th-
everything, and yeah, and we'll.
No, thanks for having us. We really appreciate the attention and the support, for this new strange project of ours. And, what better representative in the bass world than yourself? And obviously nice to see you again. So,
likewise. Yeah.
from this bass player duo and from the new band that we made, really, really appreciate the attention and, and spreading the word of this new thing. You know how the promo phase for new stuff goes.
Oh yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so definitely, thank you, sir, and I hope to see you soon. I might come hang out another Metal Allegiance song. I kick maybe Jack Gibson out of the way or something, and then me and you can
Come on in. Yeah. I mean, we've had 2 or 3 bass players up there at a time, and it's quite the racket, but somehow it works, So orchestrating bass player parts in a heavy metal setting, So
well,
Much fun.
me and Jeroen took on that in our way, so
sure did.
yeah. The
Cool.
door's open. Let's do like you said, a big bass storm. Let's give the crowd more low end than they've ever had.
I like it. All right, guys, have a good
Awesome.
one. We'll be in touch. Yeah.
Thank
See
you.
guys. See ya.
All right. Take care, guys.